Greetings, brothers and sisters. Greetings unto you. Glad to be here. Glad to be moving forward. Glad to be on this battlefield. We must admit, brothers and sisters, that we're on a battlefield. And God has called us out. So we're going through these, thank you, brother, going through these changes that the enemy has set up for us. And God is challenging us to make the correct decisions in a time such as this. God is challenging us. We'll have to face any problem that we go through. We'll have to face it head on. We have to face it head on because God is calling for soldiers. God is. Right? When we look at the situation that we have in America, we look at the situation that we are in as black people. Very strange situation. Very strange situation. But when we look at it, we have some understanding. We have some understanding that God has called us out for a purpose. He has called us out. So, brothers and sisters, God has a plan for us. God has a plan for you and I. God does. And we have to embrace the plan of God. We don't have a choice. We have to embrace it. Because when you look, there's trouble all over the land. Confusion all around. I'm sure you would agree. And we have trouble in this land. God is looking for soldiers. God is looking for soldiers. So, brothers and sisters, I want to get my Bible because I want to be able to read Isaiah to you. You know we have to read Isaiah. So I'll be right back with that information. Thank you, brothers and sisters. I appreciate you. Welcome. Peace be unto you. And the blessings of God be unto you. Blessings of God. Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you in Arabic tongue. Our original tongue, brothers and sisters. English is not our language. Our original tongue is Arabic. So I greet you in the words of peace. And I bring great tidings to you from God the Father. Isn't that right? When I tell you that God's entire desire is that you would be free, brothers and sisters, that you and I would be free. So I want to get the good book. I want to be able to read to you what God has given me and continue to give me to give to you today. If you excuse me one moment, please. I got it, brothers and sisters. I want to be able to read this to you. I rush to get it so that I'll be able to read this great word to you that God has given us to encourage us in a time such as this, so that you and I will be encouraged in these dark times. And that's what we need. We need encouragement in these dark times, brothers and sisters, to know that God is able. God will do just as he said. He will deliver us from this fiery furnace. He will deliver us from the lion's den. Isn't that right, brothers and sisters? And he will deliver us out of the hand of the prophets of Baal. Right? Because we have not bowed down, nor will we bow down to the white powers of this world. We won't do it. We won't bow down to the white global Western power structure. We won't bow down to it. So I'm excited, brothers and sisters. I'm happy. I'm excited. So excited today. He's standing in the holy place. Isn't that right? You and I are standing in the place today. We're standing up in the power and awesome ability of God, who is omnipotent, omnipresent. Isn't that right? He's everywhere, every place, at all times. All powerful, knows all science. Right? Isn't that right? So God has called you and I to deliver the mass. That's what he called us for. That's what he called you and I for. So I'm ready. I'm ready to do God's will. I'm ready, brothers and sisters. I won't let anything stop me. And I am a challenge because I will face my adversity to do the work and will of God. Do the work and will of God. So we'll wait a little while. We'll see who's yet coming. Right? But you know, after the theme song, we go into it. Whatever we have, whoever we have, we'll go deliver this word. We go in to deliver this word. All praises be to Allah for that encouraging song. Right? Because one day, brothers and sisters, we're definitely going to be free. And I'd like to read to you Isaiah the 14th chapter and the 14th verse to keep a memory on God's promise to us. When he said, this is the devil, says to God, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to both sides of the pit. They that see thee narrowly shall look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man? What man? The white man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms. So that's the 14th book of Isaiah, the 14th through the 16th verse. And that's talking about the end of the story. So Satan's end is near. Isn't that right, brothers and sisters? Satan's end is near. He doesn't have very long. So you got to work fast and do all the evil that he can, because our deliverance has come. Our Savior, bless God, has come, brothers and sisters. And so we're happy, we're encouraged today. We're both happy and encouraged to do God's will. We have to be strong, brothers and sisters. I'm learning every day. Every day I'm learning. I'm learning. Every day. The wiles and tricks of the devil. Excuse me, brothers and sisters. It's been a long day, been pushing. Didn't see any physical results today, but I know that our work is not in vain, right? But we have to push even more so to bring about that city, right? The old folks used to sing a song, going to a city a beautiful city not made by the hands of man, right? They'll be singing and shouting, no more room for doubting. I'm going to the city not made by the hands of man. Brothers and sisters, this is talking about the spiritual city. Well, we're going to create the physical city, but the spiritual city is made by God. The spiritual city comes from God Almighty. And God desires that you and I will stand up to discuss freedom. We've come today to talk about Cleage and the shrine of the Black Madonna, because some people wanted to know about the shrine, so we're going to read it about the shrine of the Black Madonna. A lot of people don't know about it and need to know about the shrine of the Black Madonna, what it means. And this shrine is the Christian side of black nationalism. If you're a Christian and a black nationalist, the shrine of the Black Madonna is where you need to be, brothers and sisters. And we pray that there'll be those to raise up more shrines like this around America for the Christians, so-called black Christian. I said so-called because Jesus himself was a Muslim. But there are not many black people that know it. So they don't identify themselves with the master. They might identify themselves with a phrase associated with the master, but they don't identify themselves with the master really. Because first of all, you got to understand that Jesus was black. Right? And this is what one of Cleage's strange and powerful messages to that Christian. They feel like that is strange yet powerful because they don't even know anything about Jesus. They don't know about him as a historical figure. The only thing they know about Jesus is that he healed, and he's one of the main characters, understand what I'm saying, in the Christian religion, right? And in the hyperbole, associated with Christianity. Isn't that right? But we know that he was real. We bear witness to that, brothers and sisters, because he's real in us. Right? And that what the old Negro spirituals used to say, we know that he's real. How do we know? He's real. I feel him in my soul, right? There's something that we have to feel. Brothers and sisters, we got to feel it. We can't guess on it. We've got to feel it. And so Cleage, I respect that brother because he was convinced that the shrine of the Black Madonna of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church, first one of its kind. You had the African Orthodox Christian Church, but you didn't have the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. Now we have the Pan-Orthodox Christian Church, shrine of the Black Madonna, that was brought on by Cleage. Brothers and sisters, Cleage had a plan that we talked about yesterday, right? We talked about his name, Jaramonga Abibi Agiman, right? His African name, which means that he had come into the full transformation of being African and living in America, right? So he had made the transition while he was alive, brothers and sisters, right? You will be changed in a twinkling of an eye. Yeah, this is talking about your mind when you're awake. See, because when you're dead, you're done. But when your mind is awakened and quickening, is that right? Right? Then your walk is new, your talk is new, right? Because you're not talking as a slave, but yet you're talking as a free man. If you remember, I believe it's in the book of Jude when they talk about Onesimus, right? One of the New Testament books, the latter New Testament, talked about Onesimus and how they needed to free Onesimus because he had become a Christian. So he was no longer in bondage. St. Paul tried to use something that Martin Luther King tried to use. He tried to talk freedom based on the religious association of Christianity for the slave while they were yet in bondage. And he focused on the scripture talking about that the slave, once he accept Jesus, was no longer a slave. But how many people know that you can't reason with a heathen? Agrippa was a white man. Agrippa was a man with bloody hands. Isn't that right? He stood before Agrippa as judge to speak when he was on his way into the Roman jail. And he was going to jail because he was leading Christians to stand up for their rights and not to fall in subjection of the oppressing government or the regime in charge, right? So St. Paul himself, Albert Cleage tells us that St. Paul was a sellout because he tried to save and identify with masters that were some of the cruelest beasts that this world has ever seen, the Romans and the Greeks. They killed so many Christians. Millions of Christians died in the catacombs, brothers and sisters. This is serious business. They were in the same bondage that we're in today. St. Paul was in that bondage. St. Luke, St. Mark, St. Matthew, St. John, right? Judas, Matthias, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Andrew, Peter. Isn't that right? They were in bondage, just like we're in bondage today. See, the Bible is not a fairy tale. It's a story of our history and a story of our ancestors being in bondage when they accepted these cave dwellers out of Europe, the Mediterranean, and brought them into the shores of Malta and brought them into the district of Carthage, which is present-day Libya. And this is how the Platonic War started, because they wanted to own us as slaves from the initial outstart. So we have to understand there's nothing new under the sun. What's happening today has been, and what has been shall be. Isn't that right, brothers and sisters? Isn't that what the Word teaches us? The Word teaches us that. So in this shrine of the Black Madonna was built by Albert Cleage, and its significant association with human rights and civil rights, right, as it relates to the 20th century African American, right? It was built to talk about Pan-Africanism and the desire of Pan-Africanism through the act of black nationalism, which would make us free. That's the purpose of it. Albert Cleage wanted to organize us as individuals and band with others who thought something like us and looked like us so that we could fight for freedom. That was his main purpose, brothers and sisters. That was his main purpose. Now I want to tell you that this church building is still located in Detroit on 76th and 25th Linwood. If you get a chance to see it, it's a very beautiful structure. That's in Detroit, Michigan. The building was made around 1915. And at that time, it had been a congregational church for the Pilgrims, right? They were known as the Brewster Pilgrim Congregational Church at that time. In its construction, it was a single-story stucco building. Is that right? Just north of the location. Now, in that location, just north of the location, 7625th Linwood in Detroit, Linwood Street in Detroit, Michigan. Now, the congregation hired an architect. This architect you're going to be familiar with. If you know anything about structures and building, you'll be familiar with this architect. He was a black architect who practiced in Detroit, Michigan. And I say practice because he was fluent in these buildings. It was, and the history associated with these buildings. You have to understand that he was very, very fluent in the work that he did. And if you look at his work, he had so much art to go along with it in the 19th and the 20th century, the early decades. And his name was George Whit Mason. Mason, we want to talk about him, and then we're going to get on back, because I think it's important that we understand who Mason is, because then you'll get a better appreciation of this privilege and pride that Cleage had. Mason was really genius. Now, his name was George DeWitt Mason. He was born in 1856. And so you see, he was born just before emancipation. Though he died June 1948. Now, Mason was a very peculiar and gifted architect. And it's strange he has the name Mason, because Mason means builder. Isn't that right, brothers and sisters? And George Mason was born in Syracuse, New York, the son of James H. Mason and Zelda Mason, who still carried the same building. This thing of building went in his family. This is where Mason received his early education toward architect. He began his career in Detroit at Hugh Smith. If you've been there, 1875. If you've done history on this, I guess I'm singing to the choir, but I just want to tell those out there a little bit something about Charles DeWitt, or rather George DeWitt Mason. After he left the Smith School of Architect, he moved to a firm of architect by Henry T. Brush. Now here's the Jew. This is a Jew. This Jewish architect that was located in Memphis, this Henry T. Brush, was located, in Detroit, Michigan. This Henry T. Brush was born in Detroit, was a son, here's the money, the son of Amanda Bush, and here's the money. This is the money for you, right? His father was from Canada, right? And he was well connected. His father died by the time he was 11, but it had already made him connected in so many instances to the wealth and the liberty and the privilege of receiving loans and things of that nature to bring him into the wealth of Detroit. So in other words, his family was already established, right, in architect and draftsman. That's what they called it then, in 1872. I'm trying to give you the thumbnail sketch. He obtained a job at the Detroit office of J.V. Smith and Company, right? If you're in Detroit, you know about J.V. Smith and Company. And then the next year, he moved to the farm Porter and Watkins. So he's moving out to establish himself. There's another guy named Hugh Smith, and they formed their own company, right? They left J.V. Smith and Company. He moved to Porter and Watkins, right, for a little bit of time. This is still in Detroit. And then him and this guy named Hugh Smith formed their own company in the second half of 1875. So Hugh Smith and this guy Henry split and formed separate firms. right? George D. Mason originally started his architectural career with Smith new firm in efforts to learn design. Do you understand what I'm saying, brothers and sisters? And cornices from it. They learning this design, right? But that only lasted a summer because by fall Mason had moved to Henry's firm, right? And he thought the opportunities were better there, right? But you know, he couldn't work for no white man. He had worked there 9 months without pay. They were mistreating him all around. But in 1878, Mason left Henry's firm. That same year, Henry formed a new partnership with John E. Donaldson. And these two Jews, a Jew and an Irish, remained partners until Henry's death, right? We're talking about Henry T. Brush death. They remained partners until his death. It's unclear. He died in 1879. Now, I want you to understand that there's no clear understanding on how the man even died. Right? No clear understanding. But we do know that he suffered from chronic bouts of depression due to the loss of the stock market, right? And they said from the loss of his wife too, Jeannie, who ran the business, but they had failure and with economic upheavals in the country resulting from the panic of 1873. And I'm about to get back to this. Now that panic in 1873 was a financial crisis, brothers and sisters, same thing we're going through today. The very same thing that we're going through today. This financial crisis was triggered by an economic depression in Europe and North America that lasted from 1873 to 1877 or 1879. Now listen to this. France and Britain, right, started 2 decades of stagnation known as the Long Depression. Now, you know that they had another depression to come in the 1920s. What's happening is slavery has ended. See, what I'm trying to get you to see is that you are a cash crop to this white man. He can't do nothing without you. They needed Mason because Mason was coming basically with the gifts, right? From oppression, from slavery, from grandparents that had been in slavery, parents that had been in slavery. He was coming with the gift, but had to build a type of resume, if you will, right? He had to build a resume in order for him to have the credentials to start his own building. Isn't that right? Enough white people see you, black people will begin to respect you. You know how it goes, brothers and sisters. You know how it goes. And a lot of people say, well, they didn't have slavery in New York. I beg your pardon. They had slavery in New York. James H. and Zelda E. Mason had parents and grandparents that had been in slavery, right? And they were architects in slavery. When this teaching had failed to George Mason, right, his job, coming from an architectural family that was good business, building stuff, right, that was good business, his job was to learn building for designs for his family. I just want to tell you that. A lot of people have to know, a lot of black people, even today, you can have a gift. Right, brothers and sisters? You can have a gift today. You can have a gift. But our brothers and sisters may not value that gift, right? If they don't see you working for white people. That's true. Black people keep each other in bondage with extraordinary expectations from their black professionals. See, and so Mason, in making this building, which was considered to be a holy monument, him in making this building and building this building would help him in 2 ways. Help him as a black architectural practice to build up New York. Second thing they would do would be able to build up the black community. he was organized and prone that way. He was organized and prone to do just that. Now, let's look at the time when Albert Cleage assumed the church, because we need to know what's going on financially in these areas at the time. And see, it's the same thing we're going through today. We are forced to build today. Isn't that right, brothers and sisters? Because why are we forced to build today? We're forced to build because we can't get jobs in the white man economy. He works us, but he won't pay us. Isn't that right? And even though you have fair work practices, it's not fair to us as black people. And they're not wrong. It's you and I that's wrong if we don't build up our own businesses and start our own institutions. God is calling us out to do that. Albert Cleage understood that. George DeWitt Mason understood that what you build for yourself is your own, right? Right? We can be thankful if somebody give us something, but God bless every child that has its own. So we know that Mason, his design and structures will begin to catch on. Now, understand that the white man was catching it in the 20s because the stock market had plummeted. Same way it's doing now. Stock market is falling, brothers and sisters. You can say what you want. The stock market is falling. Now, in 1926, he completed the building, the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Well, you know what it was called. First, it was called the Brewster Pilgrim Congregational Church. Well, the design was finished in 1926. Now, 3 years, 2 or maybe 3 years later, the original wooden church, right, was burned. And the congregation replaced it with a church hall, right, that was completed in the 1930s. So Mason had created for him a source of income and sort of had become like a brilliant architecture. Now, by the late 1950s, after these white people had lost this church, come on somebody, because they couldn't bounce back from the market, same way you see now. What do you see happening now? Churches are closing. Come on, brothers and sisters. The churches are closing. Why? Because people have invested in a falling market. Black people have invested in a falling white market. Black people have. You have to understand that. You got to understand it. And by getting in this falling market, it's impossible for you to build up the black community. If the white community is falling and you steady pitching your dollars in this falling market, then you don't get a return on your investment. You understand what I'm saying? If you live in a black community, it is foolish for you to keep dumping money to the white community, because that community is not giving you a return of money on your investment. If you open up a black store in the black community, black people will buy from that black store and you get your money back. Same with the church. The church is a business. It has a business side, brothers and sisters. The Muslim temple has a business side, right? The Hebrew Israelites, the Moorish temple, Moorish Science Temples of America have a business side. If you don't invest, if you don't contribute, then that business will die. The white man business is falling. The market is horrible, and his business is falling. Just like then, we see now. The white man's market is horrible. A lot of these big churches he built, he can't even get back in it. They couldn't pull people in there. He couldn't pay them to come. Isn't that right? Because the dispensation or the era of growth for that church, right, has been lost in time. So he sees this. They're losing these businesses. in the white district, right? Albert Cleage is a brilliant historian, and he has an eye for success. He has an eye for building communities. Same way the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad had an eye for starting businesses. He could imbue black people to start business. He could imbue them to control and own a community. He could imbue them to do that. He could imbue them to look farther in building communities with land that they had and farming and things of that nature, so that you'll be able to get organic produce. So I want you to understand that, because it's very important for us. The mindset that these men had is very important for us. The Shrine of the Black Madonna by the late 1950s, right? This congregation, Congregational Church of Brewster, the Pilgrim Congregational Church, I want you to understand something. The church was shrinking. We just talked about it. This was likely due to the movement of white residents to the suburbs. What's happening today? Are there many white people living in town? No. They're moving to the suburbs. Why? Because they're creating other communities that will benefit them. Only foolish black people will follow them to the suburbs. Thank you, brother. Will follow them to the suburbs, right? And invest in that community. The man is leaving town to get away from you, and some of you can't even accept it. You running right behind him, steady trying to be in that man's face. You haven't learned today that the white man is not your friend. Albert Cleage was teaching separation, not integration. And in civil rights, he taught separation as the only plausible action for black people to get their own source of power. Remember, this is about power. So in the late 1950s, this Congregational Church, Bruce's Pilgrim Congregational Church, was shrinking. One of the reasons was the residents moved to the suburbs. The other reason was citywide interracial events as early as the 1940s, right? Because they're still haven't recovered from this inflation, from depression of the 1920s, 1930s, right? In early 1940s, they began to get some recuperation because of the war equipment that had to be made, like it made was making bombs, and this is waves came out. Women in the Air Force that came out, so they were working in these basically bomb factories, federal factories that were creating shells, bombs against Germany. This is World War II, bombs against Germany. And so they had some things opening up where they had this citywide interracial event in the 1940s. The congregation moved to a place called Livonia. This is in the suburb. And I'm going to tell you about this, and then you'll be able to understand exactly what took place. This place, Livonia, is in the city of Wayne County, still in Detroit. Right? This population is about 95,000 to 100,000 people. This is important, brothers and sisters. I want you to understand this. In the 2020 census, because you have to understand the mindset of the white man as an individualist. You are multiculturalist. You're not an individualist. You're multiculturalist. You just don't know it yet. Because you've been under this oppression of capitalism, and capitalism suggests individualism. But you have a village mind. You come from a village society. See, Albert Cleage had never lost fact of that. He never lost the understanding and the wisdom that he come from a village mentality, village society, us as black people. So when I explain this, you'll understand how Cleage was focused on getting us to an African perspective, an African mind, African frame of thought. Because if we did that, we will pool our wealth, we will practice the African way. Right? Our African way is not monogamy. Our African way is polygamy. Is that right or wrong? because polygamy would build up a population that would literally save the black man from extinction around the world, right? Because the black man is the most targeted and is considered the most potent global threat to white people who are dying, right, by the thousands daily. And to every one white baby, there are 10 black babies born. And to all of those 10 black babies born, 5 out of those 10 babies born have twins born, which would make 20 babies. And then 3 out of those 10 born have produced triplets. And this is to give you an idea of what's going on, why the white man is so scared. You are doing this and you haven't even entered into practicing, which is going to be the second phase, and we'll see it, practicing polygamy, because when you begin to practice that, you're going to have a stronger population shift. In 2050, the estimate or the estimation is that we will be 94% of the global population. 94% of the global population will be 95% of America's population. Livonia, where the people had left the church, the Congregational church, that Albert Cleage would turn into the shrine of the Black Madonna, is in Waynes County, that's in Michigan. The population is about 100,000. 95 to 100,000 brothers and sisters, and that's by a 2020 census. It ranked the 9th most populated municipality. Understand this. The 9th most populated municipality in Detroit, Michigan. In Michigan. Now, in the state of Michigan. Now, with that, I want to say the most populated areas are filled with black people. Livonia is part of Metro Detroit and located probably about 2 miles, maybe about 5 miles outside of Detroit, and with one town in between. Matter of fact, if you pass through Redford Township, right, you could, after that, you'll get to Livonia. And here's the reason. Because originally in 1935, Livonia was a township and it was incorporated as a city in 1950. Now, with that being said, they were decreasing the population and still losing everything. They haven't grown very much, right? They haven't grown very much because they got into the suburbs in the 1950s, became a township in the 1950s. Right, or earlier, a little bit earlier than that, when they became a township, and well, the township happened in 1835. They became a township. In 1950, they became incorporated as a city. So between 1835 and 1950, which is about 120 years, give or take, they hadn't grown very much. And the 2020 census is that they are 95 to 100,000 people. I said that to say this. That's not a lot of growth because white people are killing babies. They're not producing as much. See, you got to keep going over this stuff. This is nothing new, brothers and sisters. This has been happening from the beginning. So, I said that to say this. In 1957, this Congregational church, Brewster Pilgrim Congregational Church, went up for sale. When it went up for sale, Albert Cleage purchased it, right? At that time, he was pastoring Central Congregational Church. A church that he had organized. Had a lot to do with organizing. Now, Albert Cleage himself participated, because this is important, in nearly every civil rights activity in the city of Detroit. In 1963, though, Cleage and other religious leaders organized the Detroit Walk to Freedom. This is important, because you'll get a chance to understand a little bit about Cleage and why he felt the way that he felt. He drew about 125,000 people at this rally. And some more had participated on the sidelines, proselytes, if you will. And as the 1960s began to take off, Cleage continued political and civil rights activities, but he turned more to a black nationalist view. There were two reasons why. We're talking about 1963. Now, August the 23rd, 1963, brothers and sisters, Martin Luther King had delivered his favorite address, peace be unto you, brother Theory God. Martin Luther King created his address, I Have a Dream speech, if you remember. He created that address. Now, King is speaking, but it's not in faith. King is speaking in paranoia and disbelief, because he's saying, I have a dream. It wasn't a vision, because he had realized from 1955 to 1963, he had been spinning his wheels on integration, and integration was closing black businesses, right? He himself told Harold Belafonte, he said, I believe that I led my people into a burning house. This is what Martin Luther King said. Cleage and other ministers became despondent too, because they began to see that, hey, this integration is closing back black business, ain't really doing nothing for us. It's not only closing black business, but it's laying out a wide line of poverty that we never seen. We're hoping that they hire at this time black people to work in the factories, but in fact they were only using a certain amount of people to work in the factories. Other black people didn't get a chance to learn these skills and were out on the street. How many black professionals do you know, from lawyers to doctors on down, who are literally losing their practices and everything? You have to think about that. It's the same idea, the same old game going the whole time. The same game. If you invest in integration, which is a sinking ship, I want you to understand that integration itself is a sinking ship, and to invest in it would be throwing money into a pit with nothing but holes in it. Cleage saw this. So he said, look, even the preachers will cause the people to be poor, praying that they invest in civil rights and praying that they fight to get into this integration, this move of integration, which the whole purpose of integration from Lyndon Baines Johnson's and John F. Kennedy was to get in control of the civil rights movement. Cleage has an advance during this time, because he learns that if he pushed black nationalism, he could rebuild black business, you'd be able to control black commerce. So our steps should have been to go up and not down. We went down when we should have been going up. And when we lost fully how to control our own stock market, our own black economy, we were on our way, right, to falling into a system that didn't hire black people to work, that would manipulate working black people. We had no loans, right? We had no grants. We couldn't levy. You see, we were not able to, some black people filed bankruptcy. You can't, once you file bankruptcy, it destroys everything about you. It tricked us into believing that the same system built by the white man and cared for the white man would care for us too. Would care for us too. But this wasn't true, brothers and sisters, and for that reason, you and I had experienced one of the worst inflations that we ever experienced in our life. Because I want you to understand something. The stock market, you have no money in it. Very few black people have money in the stock market. Very few black people have money in the stock market. So when the economy fails, when the stock market crashes, it don't have an effect on you. The inflation of the market, if you invest as a consumer your money in grocery stores, buying cars, buying land, buying houses, right? Renovating houses, then your dollar is not worth much in an inflative market. And this is what you got to understand. It's very, very important that you understand this. Because if you don't understand it, you're finished. And right now, we're in the area now where we have to populate certain areas. We've got to populate these areas for us to be able to take them over, for us to be able to build up our own society, for us to be able to control our own economy. It's time for us to do that. We have no choice and no alternative than to build up our own community. Brothers and sisters, if we don't build up our own community, we're on our way down, and we won't be able to come out of this. The only way that we can come out of this is through black nationalistic teaching with economy, religion, sociology, and everything else. It's the only way we're going to come out of it. Now, we've seen that this market in America don't care anything about us. That's another reason why we got to pull our resources. I told you we can make our own job. Cleage has the mindset to build up his own community, has the mindset while the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is building up businesses and jobs. He said we'll build up communities where we're able to have these businesses and jobs, and we're able to buy and support the people in our community, support the business owners in our community, support the churches and religious institutions in our community, support our own car lots, our own stores, our own schools. Because it's the only way that we're going to build ourselves up. You won't come out of this kissing Charlie's behind. You won't come out of this licking the white man's boot. It ain't going to happen. The white man is not your economical friend. The white man is not your nationalistic friend. The white man did not bring you over here to be an equal. The white man brought you over here to be a slave to his economy and his institution, brothers and sisters. And that's a fact. So we got to understand this. In no uncertain terms, you and I have to understand this before we can advance to the level of ownership. Well, didn't the Bible say that I'll make you the lender, not the borrower? This is prophecy, brothers and sisters, where that if we trust in God and build up his community, which will build up his kingdom, then we'll be able to control our own economy, thus our own economic system, thus our own education system, thus our own collegiate system. Isn't that right? And all of that money will come back into the black community, into our own black banks, our own black lending institutions, so on and so forth. Cleage has a great understanding earlier on, better than any other civil rights leaders, certainly better than any ministers, even Martin Luther King. He had a better understanding of how this walk to freedom could advance the black community. Just imagine, he had 125,000 people. Imagine 125,000 people moving to Beulah land in Calhoun, South Carolina, or moving to the Shrine of the Black Madonna's community center or its housing district, right? Buying houses, attending that religious institution, supporting its stores. Isn't that right? Well, you can control the black currency of the black community, brothers and sisters. So as the 1960s progressed, Cleage continued political and civil rights activities but he turned more to a black nationalist Christian perspective. In 1967, Cleage and the Central Congregational Church commissioned local black artist Glanton Dow. How many people remember that? He used to paint murals, right, of the black Madonna, replacing a stained glass window depicting the Pilgrim, left from the old Brewster Pilgrim Congregational Church. He had to transform, right? Integration has to be destroyed, brothers and sisters. And the only way it's going to be destroyed is that we paint another picture. Integration and the picture of white Jesus put you and I in slavery, put us in oppression. Isn't that right? We've got to transform that. And we've got to paint that black Jesus black. Isn't that right? And we've got to transform black churches teaching white nationalism into churches, brothers and sisters, that are teaching black nationalism. This is important. Glanton Dow was already on a mission to change the perspective of the black mind through his art. He was a well-known black artist in Detroit. The mural was unveiled, which is a painting, Easter Sunday, because Albert Cleage knew, brothers and sisters, that you would have a lot of black people to come to church on Easter Sunday. They may not go any other day in their life, but they'll be there on Easter Sunday. And when it was unveiled, it polarized the church congregation. Some were even shocked. This is taken by black people, even unsympathetic, my God, to Cleage's black nationalist views leaving the church. I understand this. Here you got black people who leave the church because Reverend Cleage and other Muslim ministers and earlier Minister Malcolm were talking about black nationalism. And black people that are in oppression don't know what they want. You have to lead them to understand what's necessary in this time for them to succeed as a black unit. But some black people don't even know that they're in slavery, brothers and sisters. In 1967, during the Detroit Rebellion, you remember that? 1967, Detroit had a rebellion, right? This rebellion in Detroit, also known as the 12th Street Riot, you all remember that? The Detroit Rebellion was the bloodiest urban riot in the United States during the long, hot summer of protest, right? 1967. It was composed mainly of confrontations between black residents of Detroit and the police department. Sound familiar? Isn't it happening today where the police, brothers and sisters, are beating our brothers and sisters, busting you all upside your head, busting you all upside your mouth? Isn't that right? And brothers and sisters got to the place where they weren't willing to take it anymore. You and I are getting there now. We're getting there right now. You're getting to the place now where you're not willing to accept the white man beating you with billy clubs. You're not willing to accept the white man burning your houses down. You're not willing to accept them putting drugs in your community and shooting you down. Your mind is changing from white nationalism to black nationalism today, whether you know it or not. Peace, Sister D. Peace. Glad to have you here. Peace, Brother Jason. And so we have got to realize in the time that we're in that what has been shall be, and what is now has already been. We have to understand as black people that there's an evolution happening, and that revolution belonged to God. That's what we got to understand, brothers and sisters. And once we have this understanding, we'll move in boldness. But even today, if you tell black people that God is black, and that the people in the Bible, the prophets, were black, and that these holy people, the holy prophet was sent out to heathen people to straighten them out, to set the law of God, to make the rough places plain and the crooked straight, they'll look at you like you're crazy. Because black people are used to supporting white nationalism. For you to speak blackness, either remind them too much of the bondage, or remind them too much of being powerless. And the strong survive by embracing being black and being powerless to attain power. Albert Cleage, brothers and sisters, has the right idea, because Cleage was a leader in the Detroit community. If you look on, I believe it's Tony Brown, 1972. Albert Cleage is on there with John Henry Clark and this other fella. And him and Dr. Clark just overshadowed this other fella because they admitted that black people didn't have any power. We didn't have any power then. We really don't have any power now. We have better control of our destiny on the plantation, under oppression, but we don't have any power. In order for us to have power, it means from the wealthiest black to the lowest black, going over to certain states and creating a place of our own, a land of our own jobs, our own lending institution. We can do it. It means us creating our own military. We can do it, and there are little steps being made toward that right now. We can do it. The question is, will we do it? Cleage was a leader in Detroit in the 1960s and 1970s as far as the civil rights community was concerned. Although he himself was a human rights leader, brothers and sisters. This is important. But also he began focusing on church development and education. What does that mean? Most black people around that time were just one generation moved from understanding education from a religious perspective. In other words, we were going to school and receiving our education through the church. A lot of people in the South were receiving education in the churches still as late as 1985. Integration as a major mobilization began to happen in the late 60s, early 70s. We have went back an additional 50 years because integration didn't have anything to do with education, but it had everything to do with interstate travel. And the white man in a failing market, a failing economy, and another disastrous stock market crash needed to be able to pay for transportation on the interstate, and so they played the game of integration through interstate travel just to put money into the Department of Transportation. My God, brothers and sisters, it gets thicker, it gets deeper, it gets darker the lower we go. But also, he expanded the shrine of the Black Madonna in Detroit, in Atlanta, Georgia, and also in Houston, Texas. Why did he do this, brothers and sisters? He did this because his desire was to build a community. He was talking about kingdom building. Brothers and sisters, this brother Cleage was teaching black Christian nationalism and black nationalism, because they're different, and kingdom building before people, right, that had to take part in the evolution and revolution of building black communities to control its own economic resource. The task was difficult. It was allowed as long as Cleage was there. But the task, brothers and sisters, was difficult. It would move as long as Albert Cleage was there, but it would take somebody to continue to speak. How often have we had Moses is in front of us, Jesus is in front of us, Aaron's and Joshua's in front of us, who are working, who are with us, who we fail to assist in the most difficult time, only to find out once they leave, understand the vision, and to see us perish for the lack of knowledge, to see us perish for the lack of understanding of that Moses, that Joshua, that Aaron, that Caleb, when they were standing there before us. Brothers and sisters, this was his view with the shrine of the Black Madonna, to build a community, not just a church. We have, and this is one thing that discourages me, we have a lot of ignorant preachers, ignorant brothers and sisters, that will build big churches, don't have any missions onto it to feed the people, don't have any mission to clothe the people, don't have any missions to educate the people, and don't have any missions to job train people. And you have this big church that they only attend on Sunday, maybe on Wednesday, but certainly not during the week. And they end up, brothers and sisters, with a decreasing congregation, no vision, no plan for kingdom building. You don't own any houses, you don't own any stores, from a church that once had 2,000 to 3,000 people, from a church that once had 500 people, from a church that once had 200 people who could have owned houses, built stores, made jobs. They end up failing because there's no plan. White nationalism and oppression, lined in gold, isn't that right, brothers and sisters, have made them feel that they're not on the plantation. And it's so sad that Albert Cleage, in all of his teaching and his organization with the Shrine of the Black Madonna, which I intend to see again when I go to Detroit, Michigan. It's a shame that when he died in 2000, the congregation remained. It was led by a new generation of leaders, but they didn't have the vision of black Christian nationalism. They taught nationalism, but didn't have the vision of completing the work of Albert Cleage, who for all intents and purposes was the Christian side of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And what he was trying to build was rare, to put black people in a place where they could become powerful and exercise their power, exercise their right as equals, right? Because when you talk separation, you're talking equality. It's a shame, brothers and sisters. It's such a shame that our people will not take heed, to the time that we're living in. That's shameful. They won't take heed to the oppression that we're under. That's shameful. And instead of coming together, we're busy fighting one another, when we could be building the promise of God and bringing in his Beulah land, bringing in a paradise on earth and controlling that paradise with an army of angels, right? Brothers and sisters who have set aside and sacrificed, right, to protect our borders. The same way the white man has an army. This was Cleage's plan, so that we will protect our people. We will be able to build up our economy. We will have protection to protect that economy. and keep all outsiders out. Brothers and sisters, you and I have a job. We can do the same thing, but we have a job to complete. The job that you and I have is to bring that paradise on earth. If we run it, if we have that paradise on earth, if we have it, then we're able to control the circumstances and situation within that paradise. But we'll never do it by bringing the white man along. You can't do it. The white man who is responsible for everything that you're going through. I said the white man is responsible for everything that you and I are going through. And there's no way for him to help us in this time period. There's no way for him to talk deliverance with us when he is the reason why we're in the situation that we're in. This is why anytime you deal with the white man, it would always be a failure. God is talking to you and I to tell us to build our own community, dedicated in righteousness, and bring it before God. A community of black people, my God, who desire to work together, brothers and sisters, and will build up the kingdom of God and bring in the fruition of the great beyond. Not some fairy tale. There's no earth is going to drop out of the sky. Come on, brothers and sisters. We're too old to believe in fairy tales. No earth is going to drop out of the sky. But God is telling you and I to transform this world that we're living in to make it a place fit to hold the people of God. Brothers and sisters, that's all I have for you. So happy to come before you. I'm thankful, and as I greeted you in the beginning, I say to you now, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you in every time. Brothers and sisters, I salute you and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Be encouraged. Peace be unto you. I love you. And tell your black brother and sister that you're around every day, that you love them and show them love and draw them closer in unity, because in unity there's strength. And we will all be able to survive together into a great beyond. Assalamu alaikum.